The story begins not in the pages of history books, nor in the gilded halls of museums, but in the shadows of what was deliberately erased. Cleopatra, the name evokes images of beauty, power, and seduction. But what if that image, so carefully polished over centuries, hides a far deeper, far more dangerous story? What if Cleopatra's mind was not only brilliant in politics and charm, but in ways that threatened the world she lived in, so much so that those who followed her sought to wipe her contributions from memory entirely? Today, almost 2 millennia later, whispers of her ingenuity linger in fragments, a fleeting reference here, a mysterious artifact there. These remnants hint at knowledge so advanced, so radical for its time, that it could have rewritten the course of history. Historians have long debated her legacy, often reducing her life to romance, decadence, and the fall of Egypt. They speak of her alliances with Rome, her strategic brilliance in battles, and of course, her tragic death. But behind these familiar tales lies a story rarely told, a story of inventions, experiments, and secret technologies that were intentionally scrubbed from the historical record. Some scholars argue that evidence of her scientific and technological achievements was destroyed to keep power in the hands of those who survived her reign. Others claim it was fear of knowledge, of what one woman could accomplish with a mind unrestrained by convention. Imagine a world in which Cleopatra had access to innovations centuries ahead of her time, mechanisms for warfare that rivaled the genius of modern engineers, chemical compounds that could alter landscapes or cure ailments thought impossible, and tools of communication and espionage so cunning they could rival anything the Romans possessed. These were not the frivolous toys of a royal court, they were tools of power. And yet, almost nothing survives. How could a civilization so advanced, so meticulous in record-keeping, allow these innovations to vanish as if they never existed? This mystery is not merely academic. Every artifact that hints at her ingenuity, every cryptic text partially translated, every surviving image or relic that does not fit neatly into the conventional story of her reign, is a fragment of a larger puzzle, one that those in power, both ancient and modern, might have wanted to remain unsolved. We are left piecing together clues from centuries-old scrolls, fragmented histories, and whispered legends. And as we delve deeper, we begin to realize that Cleopatra's story is not just about a queen or a kingdom. It is about the fragile nature of human memory, the lengths to which some will go to control narrative, and the terrifying power of knowledge when it is feared. The more we uncover, the more the shadows deepen, and questions multiply. What exactly did she know, what did she create, and who wanted to ensure the world would never know? By the time we leave this first glimpse into her hidden world, one truth becomes undeniable: Cleopatra's legacy is not what we have been taught. It is far more complex, far more dangerous, and far more fascinating. And yet, it is only the beginning. The secrets she left behind, deliberately hidden or erased, are waiting. Waiting for someone bold enough to follow the trail through history, through intrigue, and into the heart of a mystery that has survived nearly 2,000 years. Cleopatra was not merely a queen, she was a woman navigating a world dominated by men, betrayal, and shifting empires. To call her brilliant is an understatement. Every decision she made, every alliance she forged, every move on the political chessboard of Egypt and Rome, was calculated with precision and audacity. But behind the public persona, behind the portraits of beauty and the tales of seduction, there was a mind that sought knowledge, innovation, and power in ways the world was never ready to witness. She was, in many ways, a scientist of strategy, an inventor of influence, and a master of survival. Growing up in the Ptolemaic court, Cleopatra was surrounded by scholars, mathematicians, and astronomers. She spoke multiple languages, studied philosophy and medicine, and absorbed the scientific knowledge of cultures that stretched across continents. These were not mere accomplishments of privilege, they were tools, instruments of a mind that understood that knowledge itself was power. While her contemporaries saw a ruler, Cleopatra saw possibilities, devices and ideas that could change the balance of the world. And she pursued them relentlessly, often in secret, for the world she inhabited was as dangerous as it was politically intricate. Yet Cleopatra was not invincible. Her intelligence, her ambition, made her a target. Every decision carried consequences, and every triumph invited envy. Within the palace walls, advisors whispered, rivals plotted, and even those who swore loyalty could turn to betrayal in an instant. Cleopatra's genius was both her shield and her vulnerability. It allowed her to command armies, negotiate with emperors, and outwit assassins, yet it also made her a threat to those who sought to control history itself. Every innovation she nurtured, every technological marvel she experimented with, became a secret to be guarded, not just from enemies outside her court, but from enemies within. There is a story of one such innovation, now mostly forgotten, that hints at her extraordinary intellect. Historians debate its very existence, yet fragments of papyri and cryptic descriptions suggest she experimented with chemical compounds, not just for medicinal purposes, but for warfare and defense. Imagine a woman, thousands of years ago, manipulating substances to create effects that could astonish entire armies. To us, it sounds fantastical, almost mythical, but in the world she inhabited, such knowledge could determine who lived and who died. These experiments were kept hidden, known only to a trusted few, and carefully erased from records once they became too dangerous to remain documented. Cleopatra's relationships with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony are often romanticized, but they were also strategic alliances. Each connection was carefully crafted to protect her throne, advance her vision, and, perhaps most importantly, shield her secrets. Yet even these alliances were fraught with tension. Caesar and Antony recognized her intellect and feared it, just as much as they respected it. Cleopatra had a mind that could challenge emperors, yet she had the charisma to ensure that even those who feared her, could not openly confront her. And in this delicate dance of power, we begin to glimpse a woman not defined by romance or conquest alone, but by an unyielding quest for mastery over knowledge itself. Despite the grandeur of her public life, Cleopatra's inner world was shaped by constant uncertainty. Egypt was a kingdom under siege, Rome a looming shadow, and every action she took could have catastrophic consequences. In her private chambers, she studied, experimented, and corresponded with scholars in ways that few could imagine. And it is here, in the quiet, away from the eyes of the world, that her true genius emerges, not as a ruler of lands, but as a keeper of forbidden knowledge, a woman who saw patterns, predicted outcomes, and envisioned possibilities centuries ahead of her time. But genius always invites danger. By daring to extend her mind beyond the expected, Cleopatra sowed seeds of fear in the hearts of those around her. Some envied her intellect, others feared the destabilizing potential of her innovations. And so, the careful erasure of her contributions began, first subtly, then systematically. Records were omitted, accounts altered, and future historians left only fragments of her achievements. She was remembered as a queen, yes, but the inventor, the scientist, the master strategist, the woman who challenged the very limits of what was possible, was quietly forgotten. And as we peer into this hidden dimension of Cleopatra, a question begins to take shape, a question that will haunt the rest of our journey. If such a mind existed, and if such innovations were possible, what exactly did she achieve that threatened the world so profoundly that it had to be erased? The fragments we now hold, the whispers of her genius that survive, suggest something staggering. But the full picture remains just beyond reach, teasing us with the tantalizing possibility that Cleopatra's true story is far more dangerous, far more brilliant, and far more human than anyone has dared to imagine. By the end of this section, the audience begins to see Cleopatra not just as history's enigmatic queen, but as a living, breathing figure of intellect, courage, and mystery, a woman whose mind could both protect and imperil everything she held dear. And with that realization, the stage is set, the secrets she left behind are waiting, hidden in shadows, and the search for them is only just beginning. Cleopatra's world was one of both grandeur and danger, a realm where knowledge could be weaponized, and where curiosity often came at a lethal price. Amid the corridors of her palace, surrounded by scholars, artisans, and spies, she pursued secrets the likes of which the ancient world had never seen. Some of these were practical, some were purely theoretical, and some were so audacious that they would be unthinkable even centuries later. And yet, almost none survived intact, leaving behind only tantalizing fragments and whispers, scattered across time and geography, as though someone had deliberately tried to erase her footprint from history. Among the most intriguing are the reports of mechanisms and devices that, by all accounts, were centuries ahead of their time. Ancient historians, writing long after her death, described objects and machines used for engineering and defense that seemed improbable, even impossible. One account speaks of a device capable of measuring astronomical events with astonishing precision, a tool that could predict tides, eclipses, and the movements of planets with a sophistication that rivals modern instruments. Scholars debate the accuracy of these claims, yet the surviving fragments of papyri suggest a systematized, almost scientific approach, hinting at someone who understood not only mathematics but the natural rhythms of the world. But her ingenuity did not stop at astronomy. Cleopatra is rumored to have experimented with early chemical compounds, combining natural substances in ways that could produce light, smoke, or even controlled explosions. These were not merely experiments for spectacle, they had strategic and defensive purposes. In a kingdom constantly under threat from both internal rivals and foreign armies, such innovations could provide a decisive advantage. Imagine an enemy approaching Alexandria, only to encounter devices that illuminated the night sky or produced a cloud of disorienting smoke, bought strategically by a woman who understood the power of fear as well as the science of it. There are also whispers of ingenious water systems, designed not just to supply the palace but to secretly manipulate and protect it. Some accounts hint at channels and reservoirs that could flood certain areas, redirect waters, or even create hidden escape routes. Cleopatra's knowledge of hydraulics and engineering, combined with her understanding of military strategy, allowed her to transform her environment into both sanctuary and weapon. These systems were not just functional, they were expressions of a mind that saw the world as a series of interconnected possibilities, each variable carefully considered, each outcome anticipated. Even more mysterious are the accounts of communication technologies she might have developed or employed. Letters, ciphers, and coded messages played a crucial role in her alliances with Rome and in her dealings with foreign powers. But some records suggest something beyond mere code, signals, perhaps visual or chemical, that could convey instructions over distances, undetectable to ordinary observers. In a time when kingdoms depended on messengers and couriers, even a small innovation in communication could shift the balance of power. It is almost certain that Cleopatra's enemies never fully understood her methods, leaving historians to puzzle over descriptions that appear fantastical or allegorical, yet hint at a practical application that was all too real. Of course, with every innovation came risk. Cleopatra's experiments were dangerous, and in a world governed by intrigue and betrayal, even her closest allies could pose a threat. Some historians believe that portions of her work were intentionally destroyed, either by her own hand or by those who feared its potential. A single device in the wrong hands could destabilize kingdoms, and knowledge, once unleashed, cannot easily be contained. There is a haunting sense that Cleopatra, aware of this, took steps to ensure that certain secrets would vanish with her death, leaving only shadows and fragments behind. What makes these mysteries all the more compelling is the tantalizing evidence that hints at an overarching design. These were not random inventions, scattered and unconnected, they suggest a deliberate, cohesive understanding of natural forces, human behavior, and strategic advantage. Cleopatra may have envisioned systems that integrated engineering, chemistry, astronomy, and communication into a unified method of controlling her world, an intellectual architecture so advanced that her contemporaries could neither replicate nor fully comprehend it. And perhaps this is why history seems intent on forgetting her brilliance. Yet even in the erasure, traces remain. Archaeologists and historians occasionally uncover artifacts or documents that defy conventional explanation, fragments of mechanical devices, partially translated scrolls describing chemical processes, or illustrations that suggest technology far ahead of its era. Each discovery is a whisper from the past, a challenge to the narrative that Cleopatra was merely a political player or a seductress. These are the breadcrumbs that, when followed carefully, begin to reconstruct the outline of a mind capable of extraordinary innovation. And as we consider these possibilities, the tension deepens. What if the technology Cleopatra developed was so advanced that it posed a threat not just to her enemies, but to the very concept of power itself? Could this knowledge, had it survived intact, have altered the trajectory of empires, challenged Rome's dominance, or changed the course of human civilization? Historians have long wondered why there is such a stark absence of surviving work, and the more we investigate, the more deliberate the gaps appear. Someone, or something, ensured that these innovations, no matter how revolutionary, would remain hidden. By the end of this section, one chilling thought emerges: Cleopatra's genius was not merely historical, it was revolutionary, dangerous, and deliberately obscured. The world she shaped with her intellect was one that could have transformed history, yet almost all of it has been lost. And the question that now drives us forward, pulling us deeper into mystery and suspense, is this: what exactly did she create, and who went to such lengths to erase it? The answer lies in the shadows of history, waiting for those willing to trace the faint, fragile threads left behind, threads that may yet reveal a legacy far more extraordinary than anyone could imagine. Every empire, no matter how grand, is shaped not only by its ruler but by the people who surround them, those who advise, protect, and sometimes betray. Cleopatra's inner circle was no exception. These were individuals who walked the line between loyalty and ambition, who knew her secrets and wielded them as both weapons and shields. They were scholars, generals, scribes, and confidants, each carrying a fragment of her genius and, unknowingly or not, a fragment of the danger it represented. In understanding Cleopatra's world, it is impossible to ignore them, for her story is inseparable from theirs. Among these figures were advisors whose intellect rivaled her own, men and women trusted with the knowledge of her experiments and inventions. They moved through the palace with careful discretion, knowing that even a casual misstep could lead to death or disgrace. Some were fiercely loyal, driven by devotion to her vision, while others were calculating, weighing every decision against their own ambitions. It is here that Cleopatra's brilliance meets human complexity. The tension of power is not only between nations but within the walls of her own home. Take, for example, Pothinus, the eunuch and chief advisor whose influence extended beyond counsel. Historical accounts paint him as both protector and manipulator, a man capable of steering the queen's decisions while quietly shaping outcomes to his advantage. He understood the dangerous potential of Cleopatra's knowledge, and historians speculate that his counsel was often designed to manage both the queen's ambitions and the fears of those around her. Was he safeguarding Egypt, or was he quietly consolidating his own control? The answer remains elusive, hidden in the gaps of ancient records. Then there was Theon, a scholar who specialized in mathematics and engineering. Some surviving fragments suggest he may have collaborated on projects that today we might call proto-inventions, devices and systems far ahead of their time. Yet Theon's loyalty was constantly tested. Did he serve the queen faithfully, or did he see an opportunity to harness her ideas for his own rise in Rome or beyond? The line between collaborator and conspirator was dangerously thin, and Cleopatra had to navigate it with a mix of intuition, charm, and subtle intimidation. Within the court, whispers of betrayal were as common as discussions of strategy. Letters intercepted, secret messages conveyed through coded gestures, and cryptic notes in the margins of scholarly texts all suggest a network of observation and counter-observation. Cleopatra understood the precariousness of trust. Every confidant carried both potential salvation and potential ruin. She had to know not only who could keep her secrets but who might exploit them, and in many cases, she deliberately allowed ambiguity to reign, keeping her allies and enemies equally uncertain of each other's intentions. This delicate balancing act created a tense, almost theatrical, atmosphere in which loyalty and deception intertwined so completely that the line between friend and foe blurred beyond recognition. And yet, despite the tension, some of her inner circle were deeply devoted, individuals whose lives were intertwined with the queen's vision. They helped her hide and protect the fruits of her intellect, hidden scrolls, encrypted devices, and experimental compounds. They assisted in constructing chambers and mechanisms within the palace that allowed her to work in secrecy, away from prying eyes. These loyalists understood that Cleopatra's knowledge was not just power, it was a responsibility. To wield it improperly could destroy nations, and to reveal it prematurely could unleash chaos. It is also within this inner circle that Cleopatra's vulnerabilities emerge. She was not infallible. Even those closest to her could be swayed by fear or greed, and she had to constantly measure both the intentions of her allies and the shadows of potential betrayal. Every decision, from approving a new device to communicating a strategic message, carried immense risk. In this environment, secrecy was both a shield and a weapon, and the queen's survival often depended on her ability to maintain control over information, influence, and perception. The tension of trust and secrecy reaches a pivotal point when accounts mention a confidential scroll, a document so sensitive that even her most trusted advisors could access only fragments of its contents. This scroll reportedly contained detailed descriptions of her innovations, designs, and methods, along with warnings about their use. Who truly understood it, and who might have sought to exploit it after her death, is lost to time. Yet this document symbolizes the constant danger surrounding Cleopatra's knowledge. Brilliance, when feared, becomes a liability, and loyalty is always tested by ambition. As we peer deeper into these relationships, the intrigue intensifies. Cleopatra's inner circle is not merely a collection of historical names, it is a living web of tension, ambition, fear, and devotion. Every whispered conversation, every exchanged glance, and every carefully guarded secret added layers to the mystery that surrounds her life. The complexity of these dynamics reveals why so much of her story was lost or manipulated. History itself becomes a reflection of the same intrigue that played out within her palace walls. And so, as this section closes, we are left with questions that only deepen the suspense. Who in Cleopatra's inner circle truly understood the magnitude of her genius? Who acted in her interest, and who acted for themselves? And most chilling of all, who carried the knowledge that could alter history forever, and did so knowing it would ultimately vanish into obscurity? These questions create a tension that carries forward into the next stage of our journey, where the erasure of Cleopatra's legacy becomes not just a possibility, but a deliberate and dangerous conspiracy. History is often written by the victors, and Cleopatra's story provides a stark reminder of how power can shape memory. What we know of her life has been filtered, edited, and in some cases, deliberately erased. This is not mere speculation. Evidence suggests a calculated effort to obscure the true extent of her intellect, her innovations, and the influence she wielded. The erasure was subtle at first, hidden in omissions and altered accounts, but over time it became systemic, a concerted attempt to rewrite history in a way that diminished her legacy. To understand this, we must consider both the political and personal motives that drove such erasure, and the lengths to which those who survived her sought to control the story of her life. After Cleopatra's death, Rome consolidated its power over Egypt, and the narrative of the last pharaoh was crafted to serve new rulers. The accounts we inherit from Roman historians are imbued with bias, portraying Cleopatra primarily as a seductress or a political pawn rather than a brilliant strategist and innovator. Any mention of her scientific or technological achievements was minimized, glossed over, or attributed to myth. The surviving records are tantalizingly incomplete: fragments of letters, references to inventions, vague descriptions of devices, yet they hint at a far more sophisticated intellect than conventional history acknowledges. The pattern is unmistakable: the queen's genius was systematically hidden from posterity. There are clues, however, that point to the scale of what was deliberately erased. Ancient manuscripts describe devices that could manipulate water, chemical compounds capable of extraordinary effects, and early mechanisms of communication and calculation. Yet these manuscripts are scattered, often contradictory, and rarely fully preserved. Scholars have long noted the absence of coherent, continuous documentation, and some argue that this is no accident. Cleopatra's enemies, both foreign and domestic, recognized the power inherent in her discoveries. Knowledge, particularly when wielded by a single person of genius, was a threat that could destabilize empires and challenge the prevailing order. And so, the story, and with it the knowledge itself, was carefully dismantled. The erasure was not limited to historical texts. Architectural modifications, destroyed or hidden artifacts, and carefully engineered gaps in archaeological records suggest a more physical form of suppression. Palaces were stripped, temples altered, and laboratories dismantled. Innovations that could have changed the course of medicine, engineering, or warfare vanished. The pattern is chilling, a deliberate silencing of a mind that, if left unchecked, might have transformed the ancient world. Every fragment that survived, therefore, is a fragment of defiance, a glimpse of brilliance that someone tried desperately to conceal. What makes this erasure even more insidious is the human element behind it. Some of Cleopatra's inner circle may have cooperated with those who sought to suppress her legacy, motivated by fear, ambition, or survival. Advisors, scribes, and courtiers who once guarded her secrets may have been forced or persuaded to comply, leaving future generations only the shadows of her accomplishments. It is here that history becomes almost a thriller in its own right, a tale of subtle manipulation, quiet betrayal, and deliberate omission that extends far beyond the walls of Alexandria. Yet even in erasure, traces remain. Cryptic references, mysterious artifacts, and surviving letters provide tantalizing glimpses of the Queen's technological achievements. Scholars have pored over these fragments for centuries, attempting to reconstruct devices, decipher codes, and understand processes that were meant to vanish. In many cases, the results are inconclusive, but the patterns suggest a mind so advanced that it would have been dangerous to reveal her knowledge. Consider, for a moment, the implications: a woman in the 1st century BCE, creating systems and tools that could rival knowledge hundreds of years into the future. The magnitude of this is staggering, and the deliberate effort to obscure it speaks volumes about how threatening her intellect must have seemed to those in power. The conspiracy to erase Cleopatra's legacy was not merely political, it was psychological. By reducing her to myth, by emphasizing romance and intrigue over intellect, historians ensured that the world would underestimate her. The queen who had commanded armies, engineered devices, and manipulated knowledge vanished from collective memory, replaced by a narrative that was easier to control. And yet, the deeper one digs, the more one realizes that this attempt to erase her only intensified the allure of her story. The gaps, the contradictions, and the fragments themselves create suspense, mystery, and fascination, drawing modern audiences into a narrative deliberately designed to be incomplete. What drives this section toward tension is the realization that the erasure is ongoing. Every artifact lost, every scroll burned, every account altered has created a puzzle that stretches across millennia. Cleopatra's innovations, while erased from mainstream history, left faint echoes, hints that challenge historians, archaeologists, and curious minds to piece together a truth long hidden. Every discovery, every partially decoded text, raises new questions. What else existed? How sophisticated was it? And most chillingly, why did those in power go to such lengths to ensure it would never be fully understood? By the end of this exploration, the audience is left with a growing sense of unease and fascination. Cleopatra's genius was not simply overlooked, it was intentionally obscured, buried under layers of narrative control and deliberate destruction. The tension escalates as we realize that the fragments we hold are only the beginning. Somewhere, buried beneath the ruins of Alexandria, hidden in coded manuscripts, or scattered across the artifacts of a conquered empire, lie the secrets of a mind that threatened history itself. The stage is set for the next step in this journey, the tangible, archaeological clues that may finally illuminate what Cleopatra achieved, and why history tried so desperately to forget her. For centuries, the legacy of Cleopatra seemed to exist only in whispers, fragmented accounts, and tantalizing legends. But the earth, it seems, has a memory of its own. Archaeology, with its patient unearthing of ruins, artifacts, and inscriptions, has begun to reveal glimpses of the Queen's hidden brilliance. Each discovery is a tantalizing puzzle piece, suggesting that the technological ingenuity attributed to her might have been far more advanced, and far more dangerous, than historians have dared to admit. These remnants, silent and incomplete, are the echoes of a mind that once sought to manipulate nature, challenge rivals, and shape history in ways that defy comprehension. In Alexandria, where the Nile meets the Mediterranean, excavations have revealed foundations of buildings and structures that hint at engineering marvels. Certain chambers, discovered beneath layers of rubble, display water management systems that are astonishingly sophisticated. Hidden aqueducts, concealed reservoirs, and channels designed to redirect water with precision suggest a level of planning and understanding of hydraulics that surpasses what historians believed possible in that era. Some archaeologists speculate that these systems were not merely practical, they could have been defensive, part of a larger strategy to protect the palace from invaders or create secret escape routes. Cleopatra's mind, it seems, conceived of a world where knowledge itself could be wielded as a shield. Equally compelling are the fragmented manuscripts and papyri that survive, often partially burned or deliberately altered. Among them are cryptic references to devices and chemical compounds, described in a language that mixes scientific observation with metaphor, making interpretation difficult. One papyrus describes a light that moves without fire, and a smoke that blinds the unwary, leading some scholars to speculate on early forms of chemical illumination or defensive smoke mechanisms. The documents are frustratingly incomplete, leaving gaps that have fueled centuries of debate. Were these inventions real, or were they exaggerated allegories meant to impress or intimidate her contemporaries? The mystery lingers, heightening both suspense and fascination. Artifacts themselves provide equally perplexing evidence. In scattered collections around the Mediterranean, archaeologists have uncovered objects that do not fit conventional classification. Small mechanical fragments, intricate metal components, and unusual glass apparatuses hint at experimentation with precision engineering. Some items appear to be prototypes of devices intended to manipulate light, sound, or movement in ways that could have had strategic applications. None of these artifacts have been definitively linked to Cleopatra herself, but their age and provenance suggest they could be remnants of a technological culture deliberately hidden from the historical record. Each item is a whisper from the past, teasing modern observers with a story partially erased yet profoundly compelling. One of the most fascinating discoveries lies in the interplay between her innovations and her political strategy. Archaeological evidence suggests that Cleopatra may have created devices not only for defense but also for communication across her kingdom. Systems of mirrors, coded messages, and visual signals could have allowed her to coordinate with distant outposts, transmitting orders and warnings with remarkable speed. For an empire constantly under threat from internal dissent and foreign aggression, such tools would have been invaluable. The sophistication of these potential technologies challenges our assumptions about the capabilities of ancient civilizations and hints at a mind that thought several steps ahead of her rivals. Beyond practical applications, there is a subtler, more symbolic layer to Cleopatra's innovations. Some chambers and artifacts appear to be designed with intentional ambiguity, blending art, science, and ritual. Certain inscriptions suggest knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and natural phenomena, encoded in ways that are only now beginning to be understood. Could these have served as teaching tools, experimental platforms, or even warnings? The archaeological record raises as many questions as it answers. Each object, each ruin, seems to carry a coded message, a fragment of intelligence that survived centuries of deliberate erasure, waiting for those skilled, or daring, enough to interpret it. And yet, the process of uncovering these clues is fraught with tension. Many artifacts are incomplete, buried beneath centuries of sediment, or deliberately destroyed by those who feared their implications. Even when found, their meaning is ambiguous. Modern investigators, archaeologists, historians, chemists, must act like detectives, piecing together incomplete evidence, cross-referencing texts and objects, and inferring intent from partial descriptions. Every breakthrough brings new revelations, but also new uncertainties. Every partially decoded symbol or reconstructed device hints at something extraordinary, yet leaves unanswered questions that stretch the imagination and challenge accepted history. There are also modern traces of deliberate concealment. Some objects appear to have been hidden in plain sight, mislabeled, or scattered across different collections, perhaps as part of an effort to prevent scholars from connecting the dots. Others have suffered damage that seems intentional, as if someone wanted to ensure that the knowledge they embodied would never be fully realized. These acts of suppression add a layer of suspense to the narrative, suggesting that Cleopatra's innovations were considered dangerous long after her death, a threat not only in antiquity but to anyone who might come close to rediscovering them. As we explore these archaeological clues, a picture begins to emerge of a queen who was not content to rule with conventional power alone. She sought mastery over the physical world, a command of nature and technology that would give her unprecedented influence. Every discovery, every fragment of papyrus, every mechanical component, every altered chamber, serves as a haunting reminder of what was possible. Cleopatra's brilliance, though largely erased, leaves a trail that invites us to imagine the full scope of her achievements, even if we may never fully understand them. By the end of this section, the tension is almost tangible. Cleopatra's legacy, hidden in artifacts and ruins, challenges the very foundation of what we think we know about history. Every discovery is both thrilling and unsettling, hinting at a level of ingenuity that could have changed the ancient world and perhaps the modern one as well. The clues uncovered so far create more questions than answers, setting the stage for the next phase of our journey, examining the rivals, enemies, and forces that may have actively sought to suppress her innovations, ensuring that the full story of Cleopatra's genius would remain a secret for nearly 2 millennia. Cleopatra's brilliance did not exist in isolation. Every innovation, every calculated alliance, every daring maneuver created ripples that disturbed the world around her. For every friend who assisted her, there was an enemy waiting in the wings, rivals who understood her power and feared the implications of her intellect. These were not faceless opponents on a battlefield, they were cunning, ambitious, and human, driven by envy, fear, and the unrelenting desire for control. To truly understand Cleopatra's story, one must follow the shadow of these enemies, for their interference shaped not only her reign but the legacy that would be handed down through history. In Rome, her adversaries were numerous and relentless. Senators and generals watched Egypt with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. Cleopatra was not merely a foreign queen, she was a political strategist whose knowledge could rival their own. Her alliances with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony were not merely romantic tales, they were calculated moves that disrupted the delicate balance of power in the Mediterranean. To her rivals, she was a threat, a woman whose intelligence and foresight could undermine centuries of political dominance. The very existence of her innovations, the hidden devices, chemical compounds, and advanced engineering, added a layer of danger they could scarcely comprehend but instinctively feared. Within Egypt itself, rival factions loomed. Court officials, generals, and even members of her own family viewed her power with suspicion. The Ptolemaic dynasty was rife with ambition, betrayal, and internal conflict, and Cleopatra's intelligence made her both a leader and a target. Some sought to exploit her inventions for personal gain, others worked quietly to ensure that her secrets would vanish along with her influence. This internal tension is reflected in the historical record, letters intercepted, subtle warnings embedded in accounts, and cryptic annotations that hint at political maneuvering designed to neutralize her threat. Cleopatra's enemies were not always overt, they operated in shadows, striking at her reputation, her alliances, and her achievements. A particularly chilling example of these rivalries is found in the accounts of one of her most enigmatic opponents, Pothinus, the eunuch advisor who played both protector and manipulator. Some historians suggest he orchestrated events to maintain control over the court while simultaneously undermining Cleopatra's authority. If true, he represents a duality common among her adversaries, outwardly loyal, yet strategically working to suppress her influence. These intricate games of loyalty and deception created an atmosphere where trust was scarce and danger was constant. Every decision Cleopatra made had to account for the ambitions of those who could, at a moment's notice, become her enemies. Mark Antony's role adds another layer of complexity. While often portrayed as an ally and lover, Antony was also a figure of political calculation. His own ambitions sometimes clashed with Cleopatra's goals. Although he recognized her intelligence and influence, their alliance was fraught with tension, uncertainty, and competing loyalties. This dynamic illustrates a key element of Cleopatra's world: alliances were rarely straightforward, and even those closest to her could be unpredictable. capable of protecting her secrets or exposing them to the wrong hands. Roman historians, particularly those writing after her death, contributed to this narrative of fear and rivalry. By portraying Cleopatra as manipulative and seductive, they subtly undermined the perception of her intellect and minimized the significance of her technological achievements. This was more than propaganda, it was a deliberate effort to shape the historical record, to ensure that the world would remember her as a political and romantic figure, not a technological and scientific innovator. The same forces that sought to erase her devices and discoveries also sought to erase her mind, leaving only fragments that hint at the genius they feared. Yet Cleopatra's enemies were not purely external forces. Within her own court, even trusted advisors could be swayed by opportunity or intimidation. Some may have taken knowledge of her inventions and hidden it, while others may have destroyed evidence out of fear. The queen's survival required not only the ability to outmaneuver foreign powers but also the capacity to navigate an intricate web of internal threats. It is within this tense, high-stakes environment that her genius truly shines. She was not merely surviving political intrigue, she was actively protecting knowledge that, if revealed prematurely, could have altered the course of empires. This constant pressure, this environment of scrutiny and danger, had profound consequences for Cleopatra's legacy. Her enemies' deliberate actions created gaps in history that have persisted for centuries, obscuring her innovations and leaving modern historians with tantalizing hints rather than full understanding. The more we examine these rivalries, the clearer it becomes that Cleopatra's story is not just one of beauty or romance, but of intellect, strategy, and the high-stakes politics of survival. Every plot, betrayal, and confrontation adds tension and suspense, foreshadowing the obstacles her secrets would face even long after her death. By the end of this exploration, it is evident that Cleopatra's enemies were as instrumental in shaping her story as she was in shaping history. Their fear, ambition, and ruthless calculations helped ensure that much of what she accomplished would be lost to time. Yet the fragments that survive, combined with the echoes of her ingenuity and the shadow of those who sought to suppress it, create a narrative more compelling and suspenseful than any single romance or battle could provide. Cleopatra's genius was not merely a personal attribute, it was a threat, a catalyst, and a secret carefully guarded and contested, laying the groundwork for mysteries that continue to captivate the modern world. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell, and Cleopatra's legacy seemed to fade into the mists of history, obscured by deliberate erasure and the relentless passage of time. Yet some secrets have a way of resurfacing, as if the past refuses to remain silent. Across centuries, scattered clues, fragments of texts, and artifacts hidden in rubble began to reappear, teasing scholars and historians with the faint outlines of a genius that had been intentionally forgotten. The more investigators uncovered, the more it became clear that Cleopatra's mind had left enduring traces, encoded in objects, manuscripts, and whispers passed down through generations. Modern archaeology and scholarship have played a critical role in this resurrection. Every dig in Alexandria, every analysis of papyri, and every restored artifact acts as a key, unlocking small pieces of a puzzle centuries in the making. In some cases, discoveries are accidental, a fragment unearthed while excavating unrelated ruins, a piece of pottery revealing inscriptions no one had noticed. In other instances, careful detective work has linked dispersed clues, bridging gaps across time and geography. Each resurfaced clue adds suspense, hinting at knowledge long thought lost, and suggesting that Cleopatra's innovations were not simply accidental inventions but part of a deliberate, overarching vision. One particularly striking discovery involved an artifact long dismissed as a decorative object. Upon closer examination using modern technology, scientists realized it contained mechanical elements, small components whose function remained mysterious, but which suggested some form of device or early experiment in engineering. The precision of its design hinted at planning and intellect far beyond what had previously been attributed to the period. Could this have been a prototype of a mechanism Cleopatra designed for her palace, her scholars, or even her armies? The artifact is tantalizing, both in its potential and in its ambiguity, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. Similarly, translations of papyri and historical documents occasionally reveal cryptic instructions or diagrams that may relate to her innovations. These texts, often fragmented or damaged, hint at systems of communication, chemical experimentation, and mechanical invention. One partially decoded manuscript speaks of a light to guide the unseen and a chamber where water moves with hidden intention. Scholars debate the literal versus symbolic meaning of these descriptions, but their existence implies that Cleopatra was experimenting with knowledge that blurred the line between science and mystery, engineering and magic. Each new translation or interpretation acts as a breadcrumb, leading investigators deeper into the labyrinth of her genius. Yet the process of uncovering these secrets is not linear. Each discovery opens doors to more questions, creating layers of suspense that modern audiences can feel. If Cleopatra's devices were truly advanced, why were they so effectively hidden? How much knowledge was lost to time or deliberately destroyed? And most intriguingly, who, over centuries, ensured that these fragments remained fragmented, scattered in distant collections, mislabeled, or damaged beyond repair? These questions add a sense of urgency and intrigue to the investigation, as if the past itself is challenging modern researchers to solve a puzzle deliberately designed to confound them. There is also a psychological dimension to this resurfacing. Every artifact, every deciphered text, every ancient reference has the power to unsettle assumptions about history. Cleopatra was more than a queen, she was a mind capable of reshaping her world. And the realization that someone intentionally tried to erase or hide that knowledge injects a layer of tension into the narrative. The forces that feared her genius so long ago may no longer exist, but their actions created gaps that continue to puzzle and fascinate. In this sense, each modern discovery is not only historical, it is a confrontation with a deliberate act of suppression, a shadow of fear and control reaching across time. Modern investigative techniques, archaeometry, digital reconstruction, and forensic analysis, have allowed us to uncover details once impossible to see. By examining materials, construction methods, and residues of chemicals, researchers are beginning to understand the scope of Cleopatra's experiments. Some artifacts, once considered simple decorations, now reveal traces of engineering intent, precision design, or chemical reactions. Each revelation deepens the mystery and raises the stakes, suggesting that her innovations were both functional and transformative. The suspense lies in what remains hidden. If fragments can astonish us today, what full knowledge has been lost forever? The resurfacing of these clues also carries a narrative thread of suspense akin to detective work. Scholars, like detectives, follow hints, cross-reference findings, and consider historical context. They encounter red herrings, incomplete evidence, and deliberate obfuscation. Each small breakthrough, decoding a symbol, reconstructing a device, or verifying a textual reference, brings a moment of triumph, only to confront them with more complexity and new questions. Cleopatra's legacy, in this sense, becomes a centuries-long puzzle, where each piece recovered amplifies both fascination and tension. By the end of this section, a sense of wonder and apprehension pervades. Cleopatra's secrets, resurfacing through time, hint at a mind that challenged the boundaries of possibility. The artifacts, manuscripts, and cryptic references do not simply tell us what she achieved, they tell us that someone feared it enough to erase it. The audience begins to feel the weight of centuries of suppression and the thrill of discovery, caught in the slow-burn tension of a story that stretches across nearly 2,000 years. The trail of evidence points forward, toward the dangerous knowledge she cultivated, the forces that sought to suppress it, and the implications that extend even into the modern world. Cleopatra's innovations were not mere curiosities or decorative experiments, they were instruments of power, potential weapons, and tools that could alter the balance of civilizations. To understand the magnitude of what she created, we must imagine a mind capable of mastering multiple disciplines simultaneously: astronomy, engineering, chemistry, and strategy, all applied with an intuition that seems almost supernatural. The fragments that survive suggest that Cleopatra's knowledge had the potential to influence everything from the battlefield to the political arena, and even the social structure of her kingdom. Each discovery we unearth, each cryptic manuscript we decode, carries a tension that is almost unbearable. This was a genius whose reach may have extended far beyond what anyone at the time, or since, could fully grasp. Her potential for technological mastery was matched only by her understanding of human psychology. Cleopatra did not simply build devices or experiment with compounds, she understood how perception could be manipulated, how awe and fear could be leveraged as tools of influence. Some accounts hint at chambers designed to impress or intimidate visitors, using light, water, and mechanical movement in ways that were as psychological as they were functional. Imagine a palace where every door, every reflection, every flicker of light was orchestrated to convey power, knowledge, and unpredictability. These were not trivial tricks, they were demonstrations of control, signaling to both allies and enemies that Cleopatra's intellect was a force that could not be underestimated. The dangerous potential of her innovations becomes more tangible when we consider chemical experimentation. Ancient texts, cryptic and incomplete, refer to substances capable of producing light, smoke, or even reactionary effects that could surprise intruders or manipulate environments strategically. Scholars debate the exact composition or intent of these compounds, but one thing is clear, they were not mere theatrics. Cleopatra's experiments suggest an understanding of cause and effect, of chemistry as a tool for both defense and persuasion. In a world of political intrigue and constant threat, such knowledge could grant an individual unmatched leverage over armies, states, and even emperors. The suspense here is palpable, every clue we uncover hints at abilities that were almost godlike for the time. Moreover, the possibility that Cleopatra may have had access to early mechanical devices amplifies the stakes. Some archaeological fragments suggest the use of gears, levers, and mechanisms whose purpose remains a mystery, yet indicate a level of engineering sophistication not widely documented until centuries later. These devices could have been used for communication, defense, or even surveillance, tools that would allow a single individual to exert control over vast spaces. The very notion that one woman could design and deploy such systems in the 1st century BCE is both exhilarating and terrifying, leaving modern audiences questioning the limits of ancient innovation. Beyond the mechanical and chemical, Cleopatra's understanding of the natural world is equally awe-inspiring. Reports hint at a sophisticated grasp of astronomy, tidal patterns, and even early hydraulics, all integrated into her designs and experiments. The more we uncover, the clearer it becomes that her mind did not compartmentalize knowledge, she synthesized it, seeing connections where others saw separation. This holistic intelligence is precisely what made her innovations dangerous. They were not isolated experiments but interconnected systems capable of influencing multiple facets of life and power simultaneously. A single discovery or miscalculation could ripple outward, affecting politics, infrastructure, and even the security of her empire. Yet, the danger of her genius was not confined to her own time. The deliberate erasure of her contributions hints at a fear that extended beyond mere political rivalry. Whoever suppressed Cleopatra's work understood that the knowledge itself was inherently destabilizing. A technology too advanced, a strategy too brilliant, or a chemical process too powerful could alter the balance of power long after her death. In this sense, Cleopatra's innovations were dangerous not just because of what they could do, but because they represented potential knowledge that, in the wrong hands, could disrupt kingdoms, topple empires, or challenge the very narrative of history itself. The tension escalates when we consider the implications for today. Archaeologists and historians are piecing together a story from fragments, yet every discovery raises new, unsettling questions. Could some of Cleopatra's knowledge have survived in secret, transmitted through generations, misattributed, or hidden in plain sight? Could the same principles she used to manipulate perception, control environments, and engineer devices have echoes in technologies centuries later? The suspense is compounded by the incompleteness of the record. For every artifact or manuscript we uncover, many more remain lost or destroyed, and with them, possibly, the full extent of her genius. Even more chilling is the possibility that Cleopatra's innovations were deliberately concealed because they were inherently subversive. Knowledge can be power, and power can be dangerous, especially when concentrated in the hands of one individual. The historical record suggests that those who survived her, both in Egypt and in Rome, understood this danger and acted to suppress it. The result is a legacy shrouded in mystery, where the true magnitude of her intellect is obscured, leaving modern researchers to reconstruct a story from whispers, shadows, and tantalizing fragments. Each new piece of evidence heightens suspense, emphasizing how fragile human memory can be in the face of deliberate erasure. By the end of this section, it becomes clear that Cleopatra's dangerous knowledge was both her greatest strength and the reason her story was systematically suppressed. Her genius, spanning science, engineering, chemistry, and psychology, created innovations that could manipulate environments, influence perception, and alter political power. Yet it is precisely this genius that made her a target for erasure, a cautionary tale of intellect feared by those in power. The audience is left on edge, aware that what we see is only a fraction of the truth, and that the full scope of Cleopatra's dangerous mind remains tantalizingly out of reach, a mystery that has survived nearly 2 millennia, beckoning the curious and daring to follow the trail into shadows. The deeper we probe into Cleopatra's world, the more the full magnitude of her ingenuity begins to emerge, shimmering through the haze of centuries. Section 10 is where the tension reaches its crescendo, the climactic confrontation between the fragments of history and the modern investigator, between the shadows of deliberate erasure and the light of discovery. As we piece together manuscripts, artifacts, and cryptic accounts, a portrait of Cleopatra comes into focus, not simply as a queen or seductress, but as a mind so advanced that the world itself struggled to contain her. Each revelation carries the thrill of discovery, but also the haunting reminder of what has been lost, leaving both historian and audience suspended on the precipice of understanding. Archaeological excavations continue to yield evidence that hints at the full scope of her innovations. Hidden chambers within Alexandria's ruins reveal remnants of water management systems, cleverly concealed reservoirs, and passageways designed to manipulate both flow and perception. Some scholars argue these systems were purely defensive, a way to protect the queen and her court from invading forces. Yet other evidence suggests a more profound purpose. Cleopatra may have been designing her palace and city as an intricate network of control, a living instrument of strategy, capable of both awe and intimidation. The ingenuity is staggering, not merely a matter of survival, but a demonstration of her intellect in 3 dimensions, architecture, mechanics, and psychology intertwined. Artifacts recovered from the Mediterranean add another layer of suspense. Small mechanical fragments, once considered decorative, now suggest sophisticated mechanisms that could measure celestial movements or transmit coded signals. The very thought that such devices existed in her court almost 2,000 years ago challenges our conventional understanding of ancient technology. And yet, each discovery is tantalizingly incomplete, a gear here, a lever there, leaving historians and engineers to reconstruct their functions from speculation and partial evidence. The suspense arises from what remains unknown, the full design, the true intent, and the applications of these devices. Every fragment points to brilliance, yet simultaneously mocks our limited understanding. Manuscripts and papyri complement these artifacts with cryptic descriptions, diagrams, and instructions. Some texts describe chemical compounds capable of illumination, controlled smoke, or environmental manipulation, potentially used in ceremonies, defense, or strategic displays. Others hint at astronomical calculations and tidal predictions, suggesting that Cleopatra's influence extended not only across the political and architectural domains but also into the natural world itself. The danger, then, was not only in her inventions but in their integration, a queen who understood the patterns of both humans and nature, capable of orchestrating them to her advantage. This realization intensifies the suspense, because each fragment, however small, carries the weight of a mind that could reshape reality itself. Yet Cleopatra's genius was matched by the persistent threat of suppression. The forces that sought to erase her innovations, rivals, opportunists, and even later historians, ensured that few records survived intact. The intentional destruction of documents, the scattering of artifacts, and the rewriting of history created a puzzle that has taken centuries to even begin to piece together. Modern investigators operate in a world of gaps, conjecture, and half-truths, where every clue carries the double-edged thrill of potential revelation and the frustration of inevitable incompleteness. The suspense is compounded by the fact that some artifacts may never be recovered, hidden beneath centuries of sediment, lost in private collections, or destroyed long ago. Each discovery, therefore, is both a triumph and a tease, illuminating the past while highlighting what remains unknowable. In parallel, the human dimension of Cleopatra's story continues to resonate. Her inner circle, trusted advisors, scholars, and confidants, played crucial roles in both preserving and concealing her knowledge. The tension of loyalty, fear, and ambition that characterized her court echoes through the archaeological record and historical accounts. Letters, intercepted communications, and coded messages suggest a world in which secrecy was paramount, and in which the consequences of misjudging trust could be fatal. Understanding these dynamics provides emotional depth to the discoveries, reminding us that Cleopatra's genius was not exercised in isolation, but in constant negotiation with those around her. The suspense is not only technological or scientific but deeply human, rooted in intrigue, betrayal, and survival. One particularly compelling aspect of these climactic revelations is the realization of integration. Cleopatra's technological innovations were not isolated curiosities, they were part of interconnected systems that blended architecture, hydraulics, chemistry, and psychology. A chamber could serve as a laboratory, a defensive mechanism, and a theater of perception simultaneously. A single chemical compound could illuminate a hall while signaling allies or intimidating enemies. Even her understanding of celestial movements could influence water management and strategic planning. The suspense emerges from the interconnectedness. To fully comprehend one innovation, one must consider the whole network, a challenge compounded by the fragmentary nature of surviving evidence. The stakes heighten further when we consider the implications of what may have been lost. If Cleopatra's innovations had been fully preserved, the trajectory of technology, politics, and science in the ancient world might have been radically different. Her understanding of engineering, chemistry, and astronomy could have advanced human knowledge centuries ahead of its time. The deliberate erasure of her genius not only robbed history of potential discoveries but also created a legacy shrouded in mystery, a tantalizing sense of what might have been. The suspense here is existential, the gap between what was and what could have been forms the heart of the intrigue surrounding her life. As the climactic threads converge, a haunting pattern emerges. Cleopatra's genius, her secrets, and the efforts to suppress them create a narrative tension that stretches across millennia. The fragments of evidence, the mysterious devices, and the cryptic texts all point toward a mind that defied convention, yet was feared and ultimately silenced. The audience is left on edge, caught between revelation and mystery, understanding and speculation. Each new insight feels like stepping closer to a hidden truth, yet the shadows remind us that much remains lost, possibly forever. Finally, the emotional resonance of these discoveries becomes apparent. Cleopatra is not merely a historical figure, she is a symbol of intellect, ambition, and the fragility of knowledge. The suspense built over centuries culminates in a profound sense of awe and melancholy, a recognition that one individual's genius could illuminate the world, yet be so thoroughly obscured by fear, politics, and time. The audience experiences a catharsis, simultaneously thrilled by what has been uncovered and haunted by the realization of what remains hidden. Her story becomes more than history, it becomes a meditation on power, secrecy, and the endurance of human curiosity. As this climactic section closes, the final threads of suspense are left intact. Cleopatra's technological and scientific achievements, once erased, are partially recovered, revealing the genius that history tried to bury. Yet the ultimate truth, what she fully created, how she envisioned it, and what was lost to time, remains just beyond reach. This tension propels the narrative forward, inviting viewers to dwell in both discovery and speculation, to appreciate the scale of her intellect, and to ponder the forces that sought to suppress it. Cleopatra's secrets, partially revealed and still tantalizingly incomplete, leave a haunting impression, a genius that defied her age, challenged empires, and continues to captivate the imagination nearly 2,000 years later. Cleopatra's final message to history was not written in ink, nor carved in marble, but embedded in the machines she commissioned, the instruments she guarded, and the knowledge she risked her life to preserve. The artifacts, fragments of bronze gears, scorched papyrus, and faded frescoes, each whispered of a mind that sought to defy the erasure imposed by empires and time itself. They spoke not of conquests or seductions, but of ideas, of discoveries too fragile to survive unshielded in a world ruled by politics, paranoia, and prejudice. The Queen's devices, hidden beneath stone floors, submerged beneath water, and sealed behind locked doors, were her testament, a message to those willing to seek truth, centuries after her death. Archaeologists and historians who have studied the remnants speak in hushed tones of the precision of her designs, the ingenuity that surpasses expectations of her era. These fragments hint at astronomical calculations, fluid dynamics, and mechanical automata that centuries later would inspire inventors in distant lands. Each artifact is a key to a knowledge deliberately obscured by those who feared it. Rome feared her intelligence, her understanding of nature, of science, and of the very mechanisms that governed the world around her. The Queen's genius was dangerous in a society that rewarded spectacle over substance, power over wisdom, and brutality over enlightenment. The machine that survived, broken yet intact, offers the clearest glimpse of her vision. Gears align with the stars, levers trace cycles of the sun and moon, and mechanisms map a rhythm of the cosmos. Cleopatra did not seek to wage war with this device, she sought preservation. It was a safeguard, a vessel for human ingenuity meant to outlast tyranny, ignorance, and the decay of empires. The whispers of its creators echo through the ages. Heron of Alexandria's influence is unmistakable, yet the device carries her own signature of innovation, as if she herself had woven intelligence into metal and motion. In the chambers where these instruments once rested, frescoes hint at the collaboration, the silent toil of engineers under the Queen's watchful eye. Her presence dominates the imagery, a young ruler, fierce and focused, orchestrating the movement of cogs and levers with deliberate precision. And yet, even in these depictions, we see the deliberate erasure, portions scraped away, painted over, or destroyed, as though the very memory of her brilliance was deemed too dangerous to survive. These visual scars, combined with surviving fragments, create a puzzle that challenges modern scholars, forcing them to imagine not just the technology, but the mind that conceived it. The tragedy, the haunting beauty, lies not in the failure to preserve the Queen herself, but in the near-total erasure of her intellectual legacy. Every device lost, every scroll burned, every symbol defaced was a theft of memory, a silencing of thought. And yet, her ingenuity persists, hidden in plain sight, whispering to those who are willing to listen. The surviving fragments suggest a philosophy of preservation rather than domination, a message that knowledge itself is sacred, and that its guardianship sometimes requires secrecy, patience, and courage. History remembers Cleopatra as a figure of drama and romance, but in truth, she was a visionary who sought to outwit the ravages of time itself. What remains of her work is a reminder that genius often leaves no trace except in fragments, in echoes, in artifacts that tease the mind and ignite the imagination. The device, the chamber, the gears, and the faded frescoes are not merely relics, they are pieces of a conversation across millennia, a silent dialogue between a queen who refused to be forgotten and the generations who would one day uncover the truth. If one device survived 1,900 years, what else might still lie buried, waiting for discovery? What other whispers of human ingenuity have been hidden, erased, or forgotten by the passage of empires and ideologies? Cleopatra's legacy challenges us to consider the fragile nature of knowledge, the courage it takes to preserve it, and the quiet rebellion inherent in seeking truth when the world seeks to forget. Her story, her machines, and her vision endure, reminding us that while empires may crumble and histories may be rewritten, the essence of human curiosity is immortal, waiting patiently to be heard again.